tongue ripper, silence in blood. In the medieval world, words carried weight heavier than steel. A sword could slay a man, but a tongue could topple kings, damn souls, and ignite heresies. In an age where honor, law, and faith were bound together by fragile cords of speech, the mouth was both weapon and threat. And so, when words grew too sharp, when they cut against authority, when they blasphemed or lied or whispered treason, the punishment was not merely to silence the speaker but to unmake the very organ of speech. Thus came the tool of terror, the tongue ripper. This was not a single instrument but a family of devices, each forged for one dreadful purpose: to seize the tongue and tear it from the root. They came in many shapes. Some were iron pincers with jagged teeth, heated red in a fire until they glowed like molten suns, then clamped onto the soft flesh and wrenched free in a spray of blood. Others resembled grotesque tongs, curved to hook deep into the mouth, their grip unrelenting. Some were spiked within, so that once clamped, the victim could not thrash free without shredding their own tongue to ribbons. The cruelty lay not only in the act but in its symbolism. To lose one's tongue was not only mutilation. It was erasure, humiliation, the transformation of man into mute beast. The sentence of tongue ripping was reserved for crimes of speech. Blasphemy was the most common. To speak against God, His church, or His saints was to invite damnation not only upon oneself but upon the entire community. Lies spoken under oath, false witness in court, seditious words whispered in taverns. All could merit the same fate. In some kingdoms, spreading rumors against the crown was enough to earn the grip of the iron pincers. And in the dark heart of medieval Europe, heretics, those who preached doctrines contrary to the church, were often silenced before they burned, their tongues torn out to ensure they could not cry out to the mob with final defiance. The ritual of punishment was as gruesome as it was theatrical. The condemned would be dragged into the square, bound, often forced to kneel before the crowd. A priest might read their sins aloud, their blasphemies repeated so that the audience could hiss and spit, so that the condemned might be branded not only in flesh but in memory. Then came the executioner bearing the tool. The iron jaws gleamed in the sun, or else glowed red-hot from the brazier. The victim's mouth was forced open with wooden pries, cheeks pinned back, jaws locked so that there could be no escape. Imagine the horror of it. The crowd pressing close, the condemned thrashing in chains, the executioner reaching in with cruel precision. The pincers clamp upon the tongue. A scream bursts out, muffled and gurgling, as the tender flesh is squeezed between jagged iron. The smell of seared meat fills the square if the tool is heated. Then, with a savage jerk, the tongue is pulled free, tearing sinew, snapping vessels, flooding the mouth with blood. The victim collapses, choking, gargling, spitting crimson upon the stones. Their screams are no longer words but animal howls, bubbling gasps that spray gore across their chin. The crowd recoils, but they do not look away. Children are lifted onto shoulders to see. Merchants hawk food nearby. Dogs lap at the spreading pool of blood. In this theater of horror, the punishment is not hidden but made into spectacle. A sermon in iron and gore. The message is clear. Words have power, and to misuse them is to lose them. But the punishment did not end with the ripping itself. Survival was possible. Many lived, tongues torn, mouths forever ruined. These unfortunates became living warnings, their mutilation impossible to ignore. They stumbled through the world as grotesque relics, drooling, slurring, unable to pray, to swear, to bargain. In an age where speech was life, they were half dead. For those who bled out, the death was agonizing, a slow drowning in their own blood. For those who lived, the shame was eternal. The medical horror was immense. Infection festered quickly in wounds of the mouth. Flies laid eggs in the open flesh, maggots squirming where speech once resided. Fever consumed the body. Even the breath of survivors was foul, carrying the stench of rotting tissue. The victim became an object of both pity and disgust, shunned from taverns, barred from markets, cast aside as a living corpse. Families bore the shame as well, marked forever by the mutilation of one of their own. The psychological torment was worse still. To be stripped of one's tongue was to be stripped of identity. A man could no longer declare his innocence, defend his name, proclaim his love, or curse his enemies. He could not pray aloud, could not confess, could not even speak his last words on his deathbed. His silence became his tomb, long before the grave claimed him. Executioners knew this well, and some relished the cruelty. Chroniclers speak of punishments where tongues were nailed to wooden boards, ripped slowly with knives, or burned directly from the mouth with heated spikes. Others tell of courts where the condemned were forced to hold their own severed tongue in their hands, stumbling through the square in shame. In some towns, the tongue was nailed to the city gates as a warning to travelers. Here, words are dangerous. Legends grew around such punishments. It was said that the tongue of a blasphemer, once ripped out, could not decay until the soul confessed in purgatory. Others whispered that ravens would not eat the tongues of heretics, as if even beasts recoiled from the taste of lies. Some claimed that witches, when caught, bit off their own tongues rather than let them be torn free, offering silence to the devil rather than humiliation to men. The image of the tongue ripper haunted the medieval imagination. Manuscripts showed demons pulling tongues in hell, eternal parody of the earthly punishment. Stained glass windows displayed saints standing over the mute bodies of heretics, tongues torn as offerings to divine justice. The tongue became a symbol not of speech but of peril, a fragile flesh that could doom its master. And still the cages swayed, the pyres burned, the tongues fell. If you had wandered through a medieval town, you might have seen them, the mute beggars, their mouths scarred, their speech gone. They shuffled through alleys like ghosts, holding bowls for alms, their silence screaming louder than any words. You might have heard the whispers in the taverns, men lowering their voices when talk turned to kings, bishops, or lords, lest the wrong ear carry the wrong words. You might have stood in a square, staring at a pool of blood drying black upon the stones, the iron pincers still smoking in the brazier. The Middle Ages were ruled by words, and so they feared them more than swords. And the punishment was brutal in its simplicity. Silence. The tongue ripper was not just an instrument of pain. It was an eraser of identity, a destroyer of souls. It was medieval justice forged into iron, cold and unrelenting. And for those who suffered it, their silence was eternal. Their blood a reminder that in the medieval world, words were worth dying for, and sometimes worth ripping out. The silence of blood lingers still, echoing across centuries.